New Orleans National World War II Museum, a National Treasure, by Shiny Visions. The rain fell gently as we hurried through the warehouse district of New Orleans to the National World War II Museum. An author was scheduled to speak on the events of Iwo Jima as part of the museum's commemoration of the 75th anniversary of the battle. We grabbed seats in the very front. It was my first time attending a program at the World War II Museum, and I didn't want to miss a thing. From this fierce and critical battle on a small island in the Pacific in 1945 came that iconic photo snapped just the moment the victory flag was raised. As we waited, I noticed that beside the seating area, there were cloth-covered tables laden with cheeses, crackers, fruit, vegetables, and dips. A server offered complimentary beer and wine. How impressive! Before his talk, the speaker walked around and chatted with members of the audience. As people introduced themselves, I learned that World War II veterans sat across the aisle from us. I was awed to be among them. The speaker demonstrated great expertise on his subject and presented his material in an engaging manner. I loved it. The next day, we returned for the public ceremony to commemorate this Battle of Iwo Jima milestone anniversary, complete with the Marine Corps Brass Quintet and Color Guard. This museum was a dream of historian and author Stephen Ambrose. His focus for the one building was the D-Day invasion of Normandy, and the museum's original name was D-Day Museum, opened on June 6, 2000, on the 56th anniversary of D-Day. Later, the museum's vision expanded. With generous donations and an act of Congress in 2004, it became a 6-acre multi-pavilioned campus called the National World War II Museum. As defined in its mission statement, the National World War II Museum tells the story of the American experience in the war that changed the world, why it was fought, how it was won, and what it means today, so that all generations will understand the price of freedom and be inspired by what they learn. In the large Solomon Victory Theater, shown at regular intervals throughout the day, is a 4D film hosted by Tom Hanks called Beyond All Boundaries. It immerses you into the hardship, horrors, heroics, and realism of this epic conflict, using Hollywood-style flair and effects, while covering the various campaigns and theaters of the entire war. It is a show not to be missed. The World War II Museum is divided into sections that covered the Pacific and European campaigns. Outside sits a Sherman tank that was the most commonly used American tank in the war. They were used in all combat theaters by the United States as well as their allies. In the Boeing Center is a wall of photos of Congressional Medal of Honor recipients, the nation's highest award bestowed for distinguished acts of valor. Most were awarded after death. Suspended above the pavilion hangs esteemed planes restored to their wartime glory. The rugged B-17 heavy bomber was used in both the Pacific and European theaters. Its ability to sustain heavy damage and nearly self-sufficient firepower was legendary. B-17s effectively bombed Germany during daytime raids and were a component of a fleet of bombers that impaired Germany's ability to supply their war effort. The fighter F4u Corsair's new design of the inverted gull wing gave it a very recognizable face and also allowed clearance for its massive propeller. The aircraft broke speed records on its maiden flight. The F4u Corsair became renowned for its firepower, speed, and ruggedness. As a dual-role aircraft, it excelled both as a fighter and a close air support attack aircraft. The B-24 Liberator flew faster, higher, and farther than the older B-17 due to its greater fuel capacity and a new lower drag wing design. The TBF Avenger served as the U.S. Navy's primary torpedo bomber, effectively interdicting enemy shipping. It was also used for delivering ordnance to positions throughout the Pacific. The Douglas Sbd Dauntless was sturdy enough for pilots to dive with precise maneuverability and accuracy at a near vertical 80 degrees. Some believe that the Dauntless sank more Japanese ships than any other plane. The long-range P-1 Mustang fighter was critical to the Allied victory. It provided needed escort for the long-range bombers, protecting them from enemy aircraft. This enabled them to more effectively complete their missions. The famous African-American pilots, the Tuskegee Airmen, were also known as the Red Tails for the distinctive markings of their planes. Seen here is one of the aircraft flown by the squadron. This gentleman volunteers his time sharing about the Tuskegee Airmen and even dresses the part. He told us that during the opening gala of the museum years ago, he met director Steven Spielberg, and Spielberg, upon hearing of his interest in these renowned African-American pilots, suggested that he share the story of the determined and trailblazing Tuskegee Airmen at the museum, which he has done ever since. Though not a military history buff, this museum nevertheless is one of my favorites. Why? Without a doubt, it is because of the personal accounts given here. Though the majority are presented through recordings, the most impactful were the in-person accounts. Several World War II veterans volunteer at the museum to share their first-hand experiences while in service to their country 75 years ago. For most of us, our knowledge of this conflict comes from history textbooks. But to listen to their stories in person of the places they fought, the period planes they flew, and the emotions they felt were incredibly moving and impactful. These men lived through the events that most of us just read about. There are not many left of these veterans, however. At the youngest, they would be around 94 years old now. But there they were, telling and retelling their stories to the crowds at the museum. What an honor it was to speak to these veterans. This gentleman was a boatswain's mate on a Higgins boat, like the one he is standing next to here at the museum. He had many stories to share about his time in service. Higgins boats were landing crafts used in amphibious landings throughout World War II and were typically constructed of plywood. Meet Champ Vinnett, a World War II B-24 pilot who served in the 15th Army Air Force in Italy. My husband reminisced with him about a close friend of his that was stationed in the same place only 1 year before and had shared stories of his time there as well. Champ was sharp as a tack. Thank you, veterans, for your service as well as your time spent for sharing with others at the museum, a unique aspect of the war that can't be replicated through textbooks. The National World War II Museum in New Orleans is a gem. It's about the American spirit and fierce determination throughout all theaters of the war, as well as the ingenuity and work at home to support the warfighter abroad. It is a graphic illustration of the price paid for our freedom. Thank you for watching this video. New Orleans National World War II Museum is a national treasure. Be sure to check out more adventures at shinyvisions.com. This is Shiny Visions.